Hello. Hello. Okay, we are going to start again. So this is about the introduction of ventral hernia. You remember what is properly ventral hernia, what are excluded, and what are different varieties of ventral hernia. Among these, the most common are umbilical hernia, epigastric hernia, and incisional hernia, and others are comparatively less frequent. First, we will discuss about the umbilical hernia. So here itself name indicates that hernia occurs through the umbilicus, the umbilical defect. So these umbilical hernia are three types. One is exemphalous, second one is umbilical hernia in infants and children, third one is umbilical hernia in adults. So exemphalous, it is developmental anomaly due to failure of all or part of midgut to return to the abdominal cavity. During early fetal life, this exemphalous is covered by membrane, where the outer layer is amniotic membrane, middle layer is Wharton jelly, and the inner layer is covered by the peritoneum. And normally what happens just after birth, there is a wide gap or defect in the umbilicus, where all the components of the anterior abdominal comes and fuse together. And immediately after birth, it may be wide gap, but within a few days or after 1 or 2 weeks, it becomes narrow, and the umbilical opening is usually closed. And this, whenever there is any defect, then a type of hernia may be there, so which abdominal contents will protrude. So among that, one is exemphalous minor, other is exemphalous major. So both these two are found usually at the time of birth. So exemphalous minor, here usually the hernial sac is small, and umbilical cord, which is attached to the summit of the sac. So thereby we have to differentiate exemphalous minor as well as major. One is size is small, other is attachment of the umbilical cord, that is to the apex or summit of the sac, and it is usually treated by stripping for 15 days with the adhesive. Because this minor variety usually doesn't require any surgical treatments. At the time of birth, even though there may be presence of a sac, but this umbilical cord should be twisted and the content of the sac should be pushed inside, and it should be ligated as near to the umbilicus, so that all the contents go inside. And after that, a stripping is done and should not be removed within 15 days. Only after 15 days it should be removed. By this time, exemphalous minor usually get yours. But major variety, where the sac is too large and umbilical cord is attached to the mainly inferior pole of the hernial sacs, and whatever covering that is easily transparent. This amniotic membrane or peritoneum transparent, and the content of the sac can be easily seen, and easily almost all the abdominal contents, mainly both intestine, small and large intestine along with liver, all are outside the peritoneal cavity, and it is mainly treated by emergency operations. And as there is a big gap, so the operation is also complicated. Easily skin flap are to be done, and then it is to be closed. But again, this exemphalous major is not a minor condition. Even mortality rate of the baby is also high, because there is less space inside the abdominal cavity. It is not so easy to put it inside the abdomen and to close it. And nowadays there are some other technicals for temporary closures, and those you can read from your books. Umbilical hernia in infants and children, and in 10% infant premature baby, within a few weeks of birth, not at the birth there is hernia, but after few weeks of birth, they are developing this type of hernia, which is easily symptomless, and both sexes are easily affected, male and female. And the black people's babies are more commonly suffered than the white people's. And this umbilical hernia in infants and children, which appears few weeks after birth, are usually not strangulated because their mouth is wide gap. And usually this type of hernia, which is present in infants after weeks of birth or even in children, are treated by conservative if the age of the children is below the 2 years. By a point treatment, a point can be placed over the swelling, and it is pressed, then it may be installed. So this type of conservative treatments, and 95% of the patients, means umbilical hernia in infants and children, get cures or recovers spontaneously. Only 5% of hernia, umbilical hernia in infants and children requires surgical treatments, and that is above the 2 years. So if the infant or children having this umbilical hernia even after the age of 2 years, then there is less chance of resolving, and that's why that will require surgical treatments. So principle will be same as like treatment principle will be same as like umbilical hernia in adults. So usually in adults, whatever umbilical hernia occurs, that is not congenital. It occurs in those conditions which cause stretching and thinning out of midline raphe, that is lineal, due to stretching and thinning of the midline raphe. Conditions like pregnancy, obesity, and liver disease. Then, as a result of this thinning out, raised intraabdominal pressure may push the peritoneal sac or a pause of peritoneum to this defect. And this umbilical hernia in adults, also called as paraumbilical hernia, because these are, even though seems to be umbilical hernia, but after opening it is seen that it is either the gap or defect in the lineal wise, either just above the umbilicus or just below the umbilicus. That is why it is called supraumbilical or infraumbilical, or as a whole. In adult, whenever we find a case of umbilical hernia, then it should be termed as paraumbilical hernia. And this umbilical hernia also may undergo obstruction as well as strangulation. That's why it should be also treated as early as possible. Now, clinical features. Usually in any hernia, the most common symptom is a swelling, which may be spontaneously reducible or mainly reducible, or which may have impulse and cough, or in case of baby, the swelling may increase in size during crying, or during defecations or mixtures, all those things. Pain is not a constant feature. There is pain. One is just a breaking type of sensation whenever hernia is too big. A part of intestine enters there, then due to pulling of the mesentery or in the omentum, there is a type of breaking pain. But whenever there is severe, constant pain, along with signs of intestinal obstruction, then it indicates either intestinal obstructions or strangulations. So that type of symptoms may also come. But otherwise, in uncomplicated umbilical hernia, the main complaint is just swelling with the other symptoms of it. Then on examinations, position, it is mainly where the umbilicus is protruding out along with the portion of the skin, along with the underlying content. So in relation with the umbilicus, this swelling is present. Consistency is, it is normally in case of omentum, omentocele, it will be firm in consistency. Otherwise, in case of enterocele, it will be doughy in consistency. And whenever you give pressures, then it will reduce with a gargling sounds. Then reducibility is important signs in case of uncomplicated hernia, and impulse and cough also presents in case of umbilical. So treatment of umbilical hernia Again, no role of any conservative treatment. Mainly operation, that is surgical treatments. We can go for open surgical treatments, which was initially described by Mayors, and that side, Mayors operation was advocated mainly for a case of umbilical hernia. And in this case, it is not Mayors hernioplasty. After doing the herniotomy, repairing the neck of the set, your defect is extended transversely in both the side laterally, right side or left sides. Then the flap which is below, with the help of suture, it is brought upwards, and about 2 inch inner aspect of the upper flap it is closed. Then the lower edge of the upper flap is closed with the anterior aspect of the lower flap, which is called as double breasting type of operations. And that is referred with non-absorbable methods. And whatever incision is made here, that is a type of elliptical type of incisions, just above the umbilicus or below the umbilicus, or even including the umbilicus. If it is too big, then umbilicus may be excised, or we can excise the umbilicus. The type of elliptical incisions along with double breastings with a transverse incision about the defect, which is the principle of Mayors operation. So Mayors operation is not only done for umbilical hernia, but in case of other midline hernia, which may be epigastric or intestinal hernia. And next one is your laparoscopic hernia. That is same with the help of tape or DEP or DAPP. A mesh can be placed in the pre-peritoneal space after reduction of the umbilical particles. So laparoscopy is more popular nowadays with the scarless surgery. Next come to the epigastric hernia, which is also a type of dental hernia. It is called as fatty hernia of lineal, also called as fatty hernia of lineal. So this epigastric hernia, it protrudes in the midline through the interlacing fibers of the lineal between umbilicus and ziphister. So epigastric hernia may occur anywhere from the umbilicus to the ziphisternum in the midline. It occurs to the lineal bar where the fibers of the anterior sit in the both sides interlacing. And through this there is weak point, and through this epigastric hernia. And it occurs through the same opening where the blood vessel pierces, mainly in the entry point of the blood or piercing point of the blood vessels. That part of the lineal bar is weak, so which either due to increase in the abdominal pressures or due to weakness in the abdominal musculature. Abdominal means mainly initially the peritoneal contents or even the extraperitoneal tissue enters. So it begins as a protrusion of extraperitoneal fat. That's why it is also called as fatty hernia of lineal. So in this epigastric hernia, in case of small, you remember there may not be any typical hernial sacs. Only the extraperitoneal fat or peritoneal fat may enter to the lineal part below the subcutaneous plates. In case of big hernia, it breaks a pouch of peritoneum. After it becomes a true epigastric hernia. And mouth of this hernia sac is too narrow. So here etiology is mainly sudden strain, which leads to tearing of the interlacing fibers of lineal. And it is seen in mainly young muscular men and lineal because of tearing of the interlacing muscle fibers of lineal. So here clinical features, it may be symptomless except a small swelling in the midline anywhere between the ziphisternum and the umbilicus. Most of the time patient comes, no such any symptom except the swelling, which may not be even visible, only on palpation by the patient with his hand or her hand. A small swelling may be felt. So as there is no such pain, so no need to do anything. But sometimes it may be painful. Because of this, extraperitoneal fat, suppose whenever enters through this, blood vessels from the peritoneum may also enter. So that may be strangulated through the narrow neck of this your lineal bone. So in that case, that may suffer from infections and that may cause pains. Then another was referred dyspepsia. It is Sometimes this group of patients may present like as acid peptic disorder or like gastritis symptoms or dyspepsia, fullness of the abdomen, all those things. So that is not due to typical dyspepsia or to typical acid peptic disorder. That is because of referred symptoms from this epigastric hernial sites. So here physically, if you examine, as it is having mainly this extraabdominal fat in the initial stage, so it feels soft. If a part of omentum enters elementary pedal pulse, then it may be hard. And here, usually the typical signs of hernia, one is impulsion cup which should present, and the other is reducibility which should be possible. These are negative. So there is no impulsion cup and not reduced. Only in some cases, whenever the defect is too big, hernial sac is too big, in that case there may be impulsion cup or it may be reduced. Otherwise, impulsion cup and reducibility is less prominent. Rather, it should be less prominent. And whenever such patient comes clinically, if we examine it, many times it may be wrongly diagnosed as case of lipoma. And that's why investigations mainly, if you do a sonography, then you can find whether it is any peritoneal content or it is outside the peritoneums or outside the lineal bone, or there is any defect in the midline lineal bone. So that can be detected by the help of a sonography. Or if there is defect, then what is the size of the defect? That can be also detected. So treatment is here same, operations, either open surgery. Open surgery again depend. If it is small opening, then it can be just simply repaired with a figure of HCR if it is less than 1 centimeter in size. If it is bigger size, then Mayo's operation can be done with the help of double breastings. And many times, as such, there is no conservative role, but patients is history of such type of swelling, which may be a case of epigastric hernia, but sometimes it may get automatically disappear. That is because of in the initial stage, the typical hernial sac is not present there, only extraperitoneal fat protrudes. So that may be impacted and that may be disappear. So otherwise, we'll have to go for open surgery, either with the help of transverse incision or with the help of vertical midline incisions. Then again, in a case of big epigastric hernia, we can go for laparoscopic hernia as well as meshplasty. So in typical mesh operation, meshplasty is not done, but meshplasty or hernioplasty we can do even in open surgery also. Without doing mesh operations, just after doing the herniotomy, closing the neck of the set, then pushing it in the pre-peritoneal space, we can place a small piece of Prolene mesh. Then whatever gap is there, then we can close it, just anatomical closures of our damage, not the double breasting operations. And laparoscopic surgery, again either with the help of total extraperitoneal or with the transabdominal pre-peritoneal approach, we can place a mesh. So laparoscopic surgery is mainly based on meshplasty. Following this, we'll have to go for the next topics. One is incisional hernia, which is also called as postoperative hernia. So it occurs through an acquired scar in the abdominal wall, which is caused by a previous surgical operation or an accidental trauma. Here, scar tissue is inelastic and can be stretched easily if subjected to constant strain. So, what are the etiology of incisional hernia? Number one is defect with the patient. Patient may be obese, where muscles are stressed due to fat depositions. If patient is having chronic cough, then also there is due to continuous stretching, the muscle may be stressed. Then anti-abdominal distension in the early postoperative period. If any laparotomy patients, if not treated properly, rise to painless, means nasogasic aspirations, or patients should be kept neurally. If those are not done, then anti-abdominal distension may occur. That will also raise internal pressures and that will help in stretching of the social lines. Then patient with malnutrition, because there are so many factors which helps in wound healing. So if patient suffers from malnutrition, then wound healing will be defective, and that scar tissue, whatever form, that will be also weak. As a result of that, so that the hernia may occur. So fall during operations, that already I have discussed in the your recurrence hernia. So here it may occur as a result of injury to the motor nerve supply, diarrhea, improper closure of the wound occurs. If suppose peritoneum, then your transverse muscle, internal or external oblique muscles, all these are not closed systematically, or if not closed properly with a typical H margins, then again in the postoperative period there may be gap. Then if improper hemostasis, then there may be collection of blood, and that will give pressure, and that will cause loosening of the stitch suture. Then if we put a tube drainage through that same laparotomy wound, that's why then should not be put through the laparotomy wound, it should be put taken out through another wound. And there are some certain reasons in which there is your any chance or predilection to development of hernia. Among that, one is midline inflammatory incision for cesarean section, whatever is done. Usually for cesarean sections, emergency case, midline inflammatory incision is done. But sometimes in elective cases, fenestrial incision, that is a type of transpositions, their incision hernia rate is less. But if it is done mainly midline and depth to below umbilicus, as because there is deficient of posterior acid, so this midline inflammatory incision is most prone to develop incision. And even in practical life or clinical, in our practice, we get incision patient with incision hernia. Most are the female patients with history of midline inflammatory incisions. Then postoperative cause, among that maybe one is wound infections, postoperative cough and distension, peritonitis, too early removal of the sutures, as well as steroid therapy in the postoperative periods. All these factors may help in development of incision hernia in the postoperative periods. Next, in the pathology of incision hernia, usually in the initial stage there is wound dehiscence of the laparotomy wound through which serosanguinous discharge comes. So, discharge of serosanguinous indications of wound dehiscence. Then, if there is again wound infection, that will also cause destruction of the muscle fiber, which will cause again weak scar and leads to fibrosis, which will be again weak, and that will again helps in development of wound dehiscence. Ultimately, it leads to incision hernia. So, this peritoneal pouch in the form of shape comes. So, clinical features, there will be history of previous operations or trauma or infection at that sex. Then it may occur at any age, but 30 elderly women are more prone to develop incision hernia. Then among the symptoms, swelling and pain, along with signs of subacute intestinal obstructions. And usually, these incision hernia are less prone to develop obstructions or strangulations because of wide neck. Usually, the defect is wide. But sometimes, otherwise, most of the wound is healthy, but in a small part, there may be defect through which a hernia may develop. In that case, signs of obstructions or signs of strangulations. Then, on examinations, if you see, there is a swelling, a water swelling, there will be presence of scar, which indicates type of incision hernia. Then easily it is reducible, impulsion calf present, and defect can be palpated on palpations. Defect in the muscle. So here mainly defect is in the musculofacial layers, because peritoneum is not defected. Peritoneum is means no breach. Breach in the peritoneum. The peritoneal pouch is entering the gap between musculofacial plates, and it remains below the skin. Of course, the skin may be also thinned out, but skin and peritoneum is intact. In between this musculofacial structure is defected. So types of incision hernia, one is type 1, where hernia is in the upper abdomen or midline of the lower abdomen. That is type 1. upper abdomen or lower midlines. Type 2 hernia is situated in the lateral part of the abdomen. Whenever insular hernia in the lateral part of the abdomen, mainly hernia in the appendix, post appendicectomy incision or scar, or in the lumbar incisions. That is type 2. So this again we can diagnose clinically as well as by investigation, sonography, CT scan or X-ray, all those things. Once it is diagnosed case of insular hernia, then we have to take the some measures, preoperative treatment or measurements. Among that, treatment of the obesity, treatment of the malnutrition, metabolic disease should be corrected, chronic cough, constipation, all those things should be corrected. Next, some conservative treatment we can give in a case of small hernia or in the earlier stage. Among that, use of a belt or abdominal belt or abdominal binders, and improvements of the nutrition, those things. Avoid the lifting heavy weight or strenuous exercise. Those things should be a part of our treatments. But operative treatments of insular hernia, they are different. Among that, one is open surgery. There are different techniques of this open surgery. One is Mayer's operation, whatever already I have discussed in case of umbilical hernia or acoustic hernia. So this Mayer's surgery is possible only in a case of small defect. For big defect or wide defect, there are some other surgery which are now of surgical just historical importance. Those are Keel's operations, Da Silva's operations, Kettle operations, all those things. But instead of that, we can go for anatomical repairs. After dissecting of the sets, the set may be reduced like other hernia operations. Then anatomically, we can repair all the layers of the abdomen, if possible. Otherwise, we can go for hernioplasty, that is mesh repairs. So these mesh repairs may be sublay or onlay. So one is retromuscular sublay mesh repairs. So retromuscular means pre-peritoneal, that is. So once peritoneum is closed after doing the herniatomy, then mesh is placed in the peritoneal space behind the muscles, rectus abdominis muscles. Then muscle is closed over the mesh as well as anterior rectus cells. Then in some cases, it is maybe difficult to get the pre-peritoneal space for a sublay mesh repairs. In that case, after repairing the muscles, we can put a onlay mesh, rolling mesh. Then we can close the anterior rectus cells. Finally, recent advances is laparoscopic repairs. It is again better because sometimes in case of a insular hernia, there may be multiple defects. So that can be detected easily whenever we approach mainly to the tense abdominal pre-peritoneals. So through this route here, it is possible, or TEP, total extraperitoneal time is extraperitoneal may not be possible. TAPP is possible. So here all the defect can be seen easily. So we are going to stop here after discussing mainly these three types of hernia: femoral hernia, epigastric hernia, as well as insular hernia. Remaining part of the hernia again we will discuss in our next class. Thank you.